Good afternoon. Okay, so I've been asked to talk about what regulation might do. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. I'm going to talk a bit about what Scottish Water have got up to under my stewardship. And I'm going to talk about something that is very dear to my heart, which is a pretty new business philosophy around ethical business regulation. So, what can water regulation achieve on its own? There's a one-word answer to that. Nothing. It is useless on its own, okay? Useless. It will do nothing for you. And it doesn't matter whether that's economic, water quality, environment quality, or any other type of regulation. It will do nothing. What's important is the governance system that the regulator or regulators work in. And what you need are clear and defined roles for the governance of that system. Each participant has got to know what they're doing, why they're doing it. There's got to be an awareness of time. Time is hugely important. We're dealing with a very long-term business. We need to be able to put in place a situation where asset investment will happen, where and how we need it. And we need a system that works with trust, but does not resort to institutional capture. So just setting up an organization, a regulator, waste of time. Answering these questions, really important. So, as I understand it, the New Zealand government has not yet decided whether or not it's setting up an independent economic regulator. It has, however, made clear, if I've got this wrong, just shout, probably have, that water quality standards should be the same across all of New Zealand, and it plans to have a water quality regulator to make this happen. One of the lessons that we've learned in Scotland is that unit costs vary quite a lot across the country. Conservatively, over 50 times, right? Now that's fully loaded costs, that's operational costs, that's annual asset replacement costs, it's enhancement costs, it's the costs of the finance, right? But you're talking 50 to 60 times. If you're going to establish an economic regulator, that's a pretty big decision, right? As a group of politicians, you get someone like me. We can be quite awkward buggers, right? We say things that politicians, on occasions, don't like. And we get to set prices. But let's think about this for a second. It doesn't really matter whether you've got an economic regulator or not, because you have, right, economic regulation today. You do not have a market that sets prices. You have no choice where you buy your water from. So prices have to be set administratively by someone, somewhere, somehow. So you have a system of regulation, you just don't know it, and you don't identify it as such. But the things that I would do as an economic regulator are already being done. So the decision of the government about economic regulator, not economic regulator, that's not really a decision of principle, that's a decision of form, right? It's about how rather than whether. That's all it is. So the New Zealand government has one of three ways it can go, in really broad terms, one of three ways, right? It can have an independent regulator. It can have contracts that will set prices, explicit contracts. Or it can have some sort of system where somewhere in local central government, someone sets prices and someone sets standards. Or maybe even someone just sets prices and then you see what you get for it. Those are all the choices, right? any of those options can be made to work. Question is, how effective are they going to be? Now, I'm going to say this, wouldn't I, right? An independent economic regulator is the way to go, right? I'm going to show you some evidence I think supports what I'm going to say. So let's have a look at Scottish Water's response to economic regulation. So the first thing I said was it's all about the roles and the clarity of the governance, okay? And I said that I have lots of power because I set prices. In reality, I don't have power as the economic regulator. What I have is the ability to be able to say what the efficient cost of producing a particular service is at a particular time. That's the power I have. All of the power lies with government, whether national or local, right? Because they're the ones who decide what the standards are. And once they've decided what the standards are, or how many people are to be connected, right? They have set a benchmark of what needs to be delivered, right? So my job is, what's the OPEX that's efficient? What's the financing structure that's efficient? What's the efficient price of the CapEx? That's my job, right? Advanced bean counting 101. Right? Now, in Scotland, Scottish Government sets all the standards. The quality regulators interpret those standards and turn them into discharge consents and measure the water quality. Just to give you an idea, the Drinking Water Quality and Regulator in Scotland has Scottish Water collect all the samples, report every result, and then the Water Quality Regulator publishes what's happened. 350,000 samples a year of drinking water quality at customers' taps across Scotland, every year. Last year, 350 of them unfortunately failed, out of 350,000. 99.9% compliance with the standards. That's pretty good, right? Only the Drinking Water Quality Regulator says it's crap. You're probably lucky Sue doesn't come down here, actually, but hey. So what actually happens in this process, right, or what happened? Right, so Scottish Government would say, go ahead, set some prices. They would set out some draft objectives, how many people are to be connected, what standards do I want, how many kilometres of river to be cleaned up. Scottish Water looks at those, says, I think I need this amount of money, I'm going to do this, this, and this, right? We look at it, or we looked at it, we would say, don't like the pricing of that, don't like that project, right? We would set some draft price caps. They would tell us that our analysis was fundamentally flawed. We would revise the price caps by a very smaller margin, and then we would finalize the price caps, right? That's what happened. So back in 2005, they asked me for £3.4 billion of investment. I said 1.8. We settled on 1.85. I thought I was being generous. Actually, they did all the 3.4 billion for 1.72 in the end, but hey, who cares about the other 1.7 billion? So, what's happened since 2002 when Scottish Water was created? Relative to retail price inflation, prices down 5%. There's the privatised companies. Bad luck if you're in Wessex. That's real bill increases over that period. That's where Scottish Water rates. Second lowest. And nice low prices, but look at the service improvements. Leakage, halved. No complaints not responded to within 10 days. Basically no properties with inadequate pressure across the whole of Scotland. Less than 10,000 interruptions not fixed within 6 hours. Pretty good. So, investment. Low bills does not mean low investment, okay? Does not mean low investment. Second highest annual capital investment per connected property, £262. Now, look at the top four there. Rural, long coastlines. That sound familiar? Funnily enough, they're all higher than this one at the bottom, Severn Trent, no coastline and urban. So, are you closer to Severn Trent or are you closer to Scottish Water? I think I know the answer to that. I think you probably do too. Now, how is that squaring of the circle happening? It's happening because in response to regulatory targets, Scottish Water's OPEX has done that. Down 40% in real terms. That frees up £200 million a year for investment. So what comes next, right? That's good, but it's not good enough, okay? We cannot relax, right? We have to have customers wanting to keep paying their bills. So if I look at it, what's wrong? First thing I'd say that's wrong is we've got defined regulatory periods, 6 years, right? So let's say, Ravine, he's got a project, right? An OPEX project, pays back in 7 years, right? Is he going to do it? No. He's not going to do it because I'm going to reset prices and he's not ever going to reach payback. So it's a real problem. You've got this time asymmetry going on. Now, it's better to set it for 6 years than set it for 1, right? But you can't just pretend that life breaks down into neat chunks. You've got to think about how the returns and the business dynamic works over time. And what does regulation do? Regulation basically works like a parent with the kids and the pocket money, right? I give you your $2 of pocket money, it's probably about $20 these days, right? And the kid spends it, right? And if they've spent it all on Monday, they don't get any more till Saturday, right? So that's how it works. That doesn't really mean you've got an effective relationship between regulator and regulated. It's not based on trust, right? So we need to get beyond that. And then we go on to benchmarking, right? Benchmarking was so powerful for us. That's what allowed me to justify the big price cuts. Right? That's what allowed me to say to Scottish Water, you've got to cut your OPEX, right? Because I could benchmark with England and say, you're not good enough. And there's nothing that winds a Scot up more than being told they're worse than the English. Well, there maybe is, right? Being told that public is worse than private, right? That will equally wind up a Scot. So benchmarking, it works, right? It works once or twice. But after you've done that, you have to find a different way. Because if you don't, the information asymmetry kicks in. People start playing games with each other. And you don't want that. Competitive markets are one way of addressing information asymmetry, but I can't see how you make a fixed asset base like water competitive. I can see how you can make a bit of it competitive, but you can't make the whole thing competitive. You're not going to duplicate sewage treatment works, pipelines, the works, right? So you've got to make sure that the capital that's committed is committed efficiently, the capacity utilizations are set at the right level and all that. So all of that potential suggests that there's a huge asymmetry of time, and we need to find a way of getting prices set in a way that allows for asset replacement to happen when it happens and needs to happen, but not because it just happens to be convenient because there's money around or government says now, right? You want to replace the assets at the right time. You want to refurbish if it's the right thing to do. You want to replace if it's the right thing to do. If sticking an Elastoplast and a bit of chewing gum on it is the right thing to do, that's what you want to do. Right? You want to make the right economic decisions. All of those things have to be addressed in Scotland still. We are not there. 20 years in, we are not there. We are going to be increasing the investment levels that I showed you on the screen from something like £600 million a year. What's that, $1.2 billion a year? Roughly the same size as New Zealand, right? Every year. We're going to be increasing that to something like, let's call it 2 billion, maybe 2.25 billion New Zealand dollars every year in today's money within the next 20 years. because we won't have a choice. We've got to deal with mitigating climate change. We've got an aging asset base that we have to replace. We have still got a lot of things we need to do to improve the environment and to improve water quality, because we've got 350 samples that still fail, and that's 350 too many. So, we found that we had to have this debate, and it was sort of going on. And then I came across this guy, Professor Chris Hodges. He's a jurist in Oxford. And he's been looking at ethical-based regulation. And essentially, he'd come at this from saying, sanctions don't really work. People who do things don't do them, or don't not do them because of the potential punishment. Usually they don't understand what the potential punishment is. Right? And even if they do understand what the potential punishment is, they don't think about it when they're doing the naughtiness. So the real critical thing is, how do you get to a situation where the discussion between a regulator and the regulated company is one of equals, where there's mutual respect, where there's complete openness, and where the discussion is about how much do we need to spend, why do we need to spend it, when are we going to spend it, how are we going to spend it, how are we going to explain how we're spending it? And if we do that, we can be successful. And if we don't do that, we will at some point lose the legitimacy of the whole process with the people that we're there to support and serve, i.e. the customers. And if we lose that, they don't want to pay. If you've got any doubt that that's what happens, do a bit of a lit search in the FT on what's been happening in England with some of the private investment and the responses of people, citizens and politicians to the private water industry in England, because that legitimacy is in the process of getting lost. Now, it'll be over my bloody dead body that legitimacy gets lost in Scotland. It's not going to happen. So you cannot have a blame culture. You cannot have it's fundamentally flawed. The system has to be fundamentally based on collaboration, openness, right? But there has also to be a sanction, because if you don't act in a trusting, open, consistent way, you have to incur a penalty. Now, I don't know what the penalty is. I haven't worked that out yet. Suggestions would be very welcome, right? But somehow there has to be a penalty there. So what does that mean? Last slide, you'd be glad to know. Right. So what is it? Scottish Water, they're going to have to evidence what they're doing and why they're doing it. They're going to have to evidence that it's efficient and effective. And the onus is on them, not on me to say it's efficient and effective. They've got to prove to me and to you that it's efficient and effective. That's their job. They've got to be open to suggestions from customers. None of us have a monopoly in wisdom. Often, the customer knows far, far better than the professional engineer. Sorry, it's just the fact. Right? They're going to have to make sure that we all have high-quality information that we feel we can rely on. And it's going to have to be about condition of assets, about risk, about timeframes, about plans for when this will need doing and that will need doing. And it's going to have to feel like it's all joined up. So there's going to have to be a degree of openness. None of this, well, I'm not sure I can tell you that. None of that. Can't have that. Got to be an open discussion. What is going to happen? I said in the deep dive yesterday, the Deloitte deep dive, you have to be open and honest about what charge payers in New Zealand are ultimately going to have to pay. You have to have the conversation. You've got to have a basic understanding of what they're going to have to pay, because you are having a false debate if you're not being honest with people about what they might have to pay. Now, they might not like it. They might say, I don't want something that good. They might say, I can wait another 20 years for that. But that then is the decision of the citizens and the customers, and it's based on something. Right? At the moment, None of us have that debate well enough, and I include us in that. But the key point, really key point, you are not going to have any system that works unless the entity that is being regulated has certainty that it's going to have the money it needs, if it truly needs it, to do all the things that it needs to do. Right? If it does not have certainty that that money will be there when it needs it, it is going to resort to hiding information or playing silly games. So that's your challenge, right? Now, I would like to think, given the sort of culture of the people I've met, second trip to New Zealand, so I know diddly squat squared about your country, right? But I would like to think that from what I've seen of you, you could get to this end point without all the silly games that I played for 20 years. But the ball's in your court. And if you have that openness, you'll be fine. Thanks for listening.